I just want to say one last thing, then we'll pivot to his theory of ideology. One thing is, law is tautological, which is to say, there's a whole section in Sublime Object called Law is Law. The whole point of law is that it's not grounded in anything. To use Lee Braver's term, law is a groundless ground. Like it is completely the foundation of how we organize society, but it doesn't have any legitimacy or authority outside of itself, right? It just is tautological. You have to follow me because you have to follow me, right? And so this tautology of the law obviously is somewhat anxiety provoking whenever you encounter it, because you're sitting there going, wait, nothing actually supports the way that we impose norms, values, etc. They're ultimately groundless. And yet, nonetheless, we have to have this groundless law in order to have society at all. And so what ideology will often do is conceal the groundlessness of law. It makes it seem as though it's necessary, that it's absolute, when in fact it's arbitrary and contingent and groundless. So it's just another way ideology. So basically, the groundlessness of the law is real. It's like this trauma that normally and usually we cannot process, that the ways we value, the ways we organize society are contingent, arbitrary, and groundless. And so ideology will cover that up too, because that real is often too traumatic to confront. But the point is, the law itself can be a traumatic encounter with the real. Now, we're switching senses here, because the whole point, like, that's what it is for the kid. And this is why ŽIŽEK has this great quote where he likens the emergence of the law into our lives, like how God would show up in the Old Testament with certain dictates for certain people, like Abraham, right? Like, he would just show up, he would demand things and impose the law on them. And there's a certain traumatic aspect to this. It's not just, oh, isn't it so great to be in the law? I mean, on the one hand, it does. Like, if you don't get integrated into the law, if you don't truly assimilate the prohibition into yourself, you end up a psychotic, according to Lacan, right? Which is worse than being a neurotic like you and me that deal with all these doubts about what's right, what's wrong, how, legitimacy of law, etc. But like, without law, we're worse off. For a Lacanian, if you don't have law, you're a psychotic, and
we'll have to do a full treatment of that idea later.
One day,
obviously, every anarchist out there, as well as all the Deleuze-Guattarians, are like, "Oh my God, this is fascism." We'll have to talk about that later. So,
the whole idea is that the only thing worse than law is not having law.
Yeah.
So, but again, like an anarchist, I get where they're coming from, right? Like, they're talking about like the bourgeois state or something like that. But law in this sense of like this structural socialization, like, does anybody actually say we shouldn't be socialized? I mean,
yeah, and even if they say it,
do they mean it? I don't.
Or do they even think it's actually plausible? And so, for instance, Marvin was like, could you say law is necessary because of class? If we had equal power, then we could be accountable to one another.
But there was law in tribal societies, right?
Yeah, there's not a human society that we've ever heard of, seen evidence of, that didn't have laws. And then also
protocols.
Also, fucking mammals have laws. So,
like, chimpanzees will fucking torture another member of their group if they perceive that member has taken an unfair amount of food. Like, they'll gouge its eyes out and bite its fingers off. Why? Because they have perceived an injustice has occurred and they're righting the wrong. I mean,
this is what we need to do.
I'm just saying, chimps have law.
Yeah. And I would just, as far as, so, and obviously, like, if you look at like a wolf pack. There's obviously like a strict code of conduct. And we're not just mammals, and it gets a lot more complicated with us. But if it's present in like all the mammals, then obviously we're going to have to deal with it in some way. But as far as like when we think of like law today, we think of courts, we think of these freaks that we call judges. We think about legislatures, like legislation policies. Like it gets complicated. Well, I mean, God, there's an industry around legislation and lobbying and all of these things. And so obviously it would look very different outside of a class society, or in a class society that wasn't inherently capitalist. It would still look very different as it did in feudalism or what have you. So yeah, it's interesting. But
Well, and here's the other thing. Like, I think a Lacanian would tell you, like, law is there to protect me from the other's enjoyment. Like, everybody can say, well, I'm not going to harm anybody. I'm not going to hurt anybody. But the point is, we all have a fear of how the other enjoys. And so the idea is that law limits our enjoyment so as to justify limiting the other's enjoyment.
yeah, there is a kind of leftist that's particularly utopian, and then you'll even get the Marxist people who kind of do the same thing, which is just to say, well, all of the things that we don't like about humans, those are a product of class society. And so we've had plenty of one-on-one conversations about, when history and whether we're talking about hunter-gatherer societies, hill tribe, dwellers, nomads, or we're talking about people who've settled somewhere, have agriculture. We're talking about small versus large-scale civilizations. There is a lot of horrific shit in all of them. And to act like there's any one stage where there's not is racist, first of all, because this is a Zizek point, you're robbing them of their humanity, which part of being a human's being flawed and having a fucked system that you're in. And yeah, we're in a particularly fucked system, but you take any other one and go, do you want to live in it? Well, why not? And it's not just because they don't have air conditioning. It's because
their form of enjoyment often, like, it's traumatic to you.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the Vikings, right? Think about the Vikings. Like, when you read about how they enjoyed themselves, yeah.
Well, half the people I have in mind would say, well, that's just white people. I would say to anybody who kind of lives in that, tension that we just described, you just got to read up on. I'd take it all with a grain of sand because the person's a bit too Jungian for my taste. But look into Lloyd DeMoss, the history of childhood. Like, this guy's been writing about the history of childhood across cultures for 1,000 years, and his project spans different societies for 1,000 years. And just read up about it, And he doesn't go. It's not like he goes softer on Europeans. Europeans were absolutely terrible to children, and still are in many ways, and as we are in this country. But the point is there's not a golden age for childhood in some previous society that you'll be able to find, unless you're reading a quote unquote history where the person's like, let me tell you about how we're like pure and the opposite of everything we don't like, that is all you or the other that we don't like,
right.
Which is pure ideology.
Exactly. Okay, so let's kick into the ideology part here. So I want to start off with this great quote from ŽIŽEK. He says,
hey.
Say what?
I said, hey. It's a ŽIŽEK quote. This is the first one of the stream.
Is it?
You were reading Jody Dean earlier. I don't know if you'd quoted ŽIŽEK yet. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, so he says, to be a Marxist today, one has to go through Lacan. Now, a lot of Marxists probably aren't going to be fans of that one, but I do wholeheartedly agree with this. And I mean, the book I'm writing right now, you could say, like, it comes out of that quote. the idea is that for the left or for anti-capitalists to fully be tapped into the spirit of Marxism, we have to have a working understanding of libidinal economy, which is to say jouissance. We have to understand how jouissance functions in ideology and in politics in order to meaningfully oppose the capitalist system. And so this is why Zizek is a kind of Marxist to this day, even though he's not going to talk like a traditional Marxist, because he's not a traditional Marxist. He's a Marxist in the sense that he does want us to have a true, not like the politics of resistance where we just enjoy inherent transgression and we never actually challenge the system. He wants us to be able to challenge the system. And for him, it involves a working knowledge of how jouissance functions and ideology. And so we got to contextualize his theory of ideology. He wrote this book at a time where especially European academia had basically declared like, oh, we're living in a post-ideological society. Fascism failed. Communism has now collapsed in the Soviet Union. Remember, I mean, this is in late 80s into the early 90s. So it's like, okay, this is the era of Francis Fukuyama, the end of history. Liberal capitalism is won. There's no big ideological debates to be had now. So we're living in a post-ideological society. This is where Zizek just comes in and kind of starts wrecking shit. Like, I mean, you could almost say like Zizek's basically said to European academia, the 90s called, they want their post-ideology back. Like, especially now, right? I mean, when we've lived through the last decade, the culture war, the rise of the alt-right, the rise of the Bernie Sanders movement, all of this, you start going, yeah, we're not as post-ideological as certain liberal leftists were declaring us to be in the 90s. And so, I mean, that's what his example of the three toilets does. I don't know if, I mean, his whole point is that the ways that the Germans and the French and the English, the British/Americans, we all have different toilet designs. And what his whole point is that each of the designs reflects the like unconscious ideology, or at least the unconscious beliefs of those different societies. And so, the point is like, okay, you can go to a conference and you can say we live in a post-ideological era, but when you go into the bathroom, you're sitting on a toilet that's thoroughly ideological, right? And so that's his whole point with the three toilets, is that we are far from living in a post-ideological society. You still there, Dave?
I was like, BRB, but I can still hear. And then I walked over.
Quiet. I was like, okay, did I lose Dave again?
No, and in fact, Anne's here. Look she's waving at the chat. She can't hear Mikey right now.
Hi. Happy
Hello.
birthday. I know you hate existence, but I'm glad you're live lecturing about Zizek today.
I'm glad.
I can't hear you.
I'm glad that my
hello, chat.
No, here, put that
Okay.
on. Hold on, Michael. Here.
Okay. Hello. I can hear you now.
No, yeah, like I'm glad that my hatred of my own existence is humorous on my birthday.
Yeah. Well,
look, I'm a kind of doomer. Well, at least when it comes to me, like, so is Zizek, to be honest. Like, his famous quote is, "I can't tell if I, what is it? I don't know if I'm indifferent towards existence or if I hate existence." Something like that.
I don't know if I'm indifferent towards existence or if I hate existence. That's what Zizek said. Nice. Cool. Well, I'll pass you back over to Dave. I'll probably stop back in again to bring some tea.
Okay.
But have fun.
All right. Cool. So, okay, this is the big point in Zizek's theory of ideology. So what is his huge contribution to a theory of ideology? It sounds really simple, but it's huge. It's that ideological formations, ideological systems are comprised of meaning and jouissance.
In an attempt to bring in new people to the world of philosophy and theory while building on relationships already established, we are doing a countrywide tour of the United States this fall.
What's up, guys? It's Ann and
Are we coming
Dave.
to a city or town near you? Do you think there is a venue or audience in your local region that would be interested in a lecture or facilitated discussion about existentialism, critiques of therapism, PMC ideology, self-help, introduction to philosophy, or the time-energy critique of any of those things? This speaking and discussion facilitation tour will include the Pacific Northwest in mid-August, the Kansas City, Missouri area late August or early September, Philadelphia at the beginning of October, and really we're going to be all over the area there, hopefully, so get in contact with us if you think that we should come visit your state. Phoenix, Arizona, mid-October, and SoCal, especially San Diego, late October. I say especially San Diego because we already have our guide for the San Diego region. What's the difference between a host, a guide, and a volunteer, you ask? Well, thanks for asking, actually. The volunteer role is for people who want to put up posters or in other ways promote the events that will be occurring in their town or city, whereas the host might have a guest bedroom, guest house, or a place that we can park our van so that we can sleep in our van. We need to know if you would have like bathroom facilities or anything like that, and so the form on the website is where you can tell us what you have to offer. Guiding, on the other hand, though, people who love to guide take a lot of pride in their local knowledge. A good example of that would be Michael Downs when I visited him in Raytown, Missouri, and he took me into Kansas City and we had barbecue, and he took me to the mall and to all these other landmark places from his life growing up there. But a more recent example would be my friend Michael in Poland, who took us around Katowice, Poland, and basically gives a historical and sociological analysis of everything, and it was amazing. It was one of the coolest things we've ever experienced, and it made us realize some people just want to provide the space and privacy, whereas other people want to take you out and show you around. And so if you're interested in being a volunteer, host, or guide, we have a special form for that, so please fill out your information and get in contact with us as soon as possible so we can fit you into the schedule, because we'll love to meet you, touch base with the local community. And if you don't think anyone else in your area is interested in the things that you're interested in, if you don't think anyone else is into this stuff, well, we might be able to surprise you.
When I saw that poster, Boulder Art in Boise, fucking Idaho, are you kidding me? It was virtually an answer to an unspoken prayer, really was. And I just couldn't believe that somebody was interested in the things that I was interested in, that I had been interested in for years and had kind of given up on in futility. I'd labored in solitude for so long. I had no one to talk to about it, no one to bounce ideas off.
This tour is going to bring together a lot of people who want to be based in text with the people they're in conversation with, and yeah, I think it's going to be a fantastic year. The only other thing that I want to say is that Michael Downs' first book is going to be published by Theory Underground really soon here. I've got another book coming out really soon here. These books will be spread throughout the United States on this tour, so I'm hoping to be able to do some actual book launch events at various bookstores. Outside of that, I guess the last thing that I would say is that Michael Downs is gearing up to teach For They Know Not What They Do by Slavoj Žižek. We're putting out all these introduction videos and other interviews related to the topic of Hegel, Lacan, Žižek, because we want to give people an accessible and sturdy basis in the discourse. The problem is that Michael Downs is very busy having to work at a wage slave job. And so if you want to help in freeing Mikey, make sure to go to his Patreon at patreon.com/ the dangerous maybe and make a donation. Thank you. I would be remiss to close this out without a quick shout out to our patrons and our anonymous donors. Thank you so much for the donations already. We've only been around for a month. We already got over $3,000 in donations. And so thank you. And stay tuned for the app, which is on its way. There will be a Theory Underground app. So the current setup is that it is a social media site built around courses where you can suppose that people who are involved in the discussions have a shared interest in the same or similar texts, and where you can assume in a lot of the discussions that, yeah, people have read the stuff that you're reading, that you're bringing into dialogue. And so, for instance, The Idea of the University by Carl Jaspers, dedicated for him. Slavoj Žižek, for they don't know what they do, dedicated for him. And then as people take the course over the years, new people will be coming into that forum. And so if you get in there early, you'll be able to see how the conversation evolves. And as new people add into the conversation, it'll bring back memories and like things that you want to work through, questions that you had with the first time that you read the text. And so I'm really excited for this. The reason I've built this website is because I think that this is what's lacking in so many other spaces, is that ability to return, to be able to communicate after the fact and in a sustained way on a platform that's not attention grabby and annoying like Discord. And so stay tuned because there is an app on the way. Thank you to our donors. If you want to donate, go to theory-underground.com/support. Thank you.